A Scottish guy debunks American stereotypes. So most people that don't live in America definitely have stereotypes of what Americans are like. You know, they might never even have been there before, but just based on the TV shows that we watch and, you know, the stuff we see on the news, people just assume that all Americans are like that. And it must be quite annoying. I suppose it happens for other countries and nationalities as well. You know, people might have an idea of what all, you know, Europeans are like or Russians. But, you know, this video, let's see which stereotypes are actually true and which, you know, are completely false and which get debunked.
Guys, I think we've been talking a lot about the cultural connection between Scotland and the United States of America recently. And in today's episode, I want to clear the air on a few things. So that's why I'm going to be talking about American stereotypes that we have in Europe. That's coming right up after this. I don't want to hang on in there until the end. All right, number one, Americans are rich. I think America is a rich country, definitely. Like the UK is a rich country, Scotland's a rich country. We all live in rich countries, mostly in the Northern Hemisphere. But does that mean every single person in America is rich? Certainly not, right? That is...
I mean, who thinks that? I mean, maybe if you're like in a developing country, you know, and you make like pennies, like, or really, really small salaries and wages, maybe you would think that Americans are rich on average.
Definitely one of the things I learned on my first days in the United States of America. Part of that trip I went with the United States Embassy was really to kind of break down these misconceptions that we have as British people, right? So they wanted to show us everything, the good and the bad and the ugly. And I think that was a good thing, right? Because like we all have these built up images of America and the wealth, right? You get to New York and you see all these massive buildings, California, San Francisco, with all the technology stuff that's going on out there. You know, all the biggest and best companies in the world appear to be from America. I used to actually work for a couple of them. And when you see all this innovation, when you see all this culture coming through on the media and on our TVs and all that kind of stuff, you think, wow, that is a rich country. Of course America's a rich country. It's stupid to think otherwise.
And the American dream, a lot of people think, oh, the American dream, if you go to America, you're just gonna, you know, become rich, you're gonna get the mansion, you're gonna get the cars. That definitely plays a role in this too, to be fair.
That does not mean everybody in America is rich, right? One of the things they took us on that tour was to see people who are in more impoverished areas. You see really fast, really quickly, there is a lot of struggle and suffering in America as well in terms of poverty. Just like there is here in the UK. We have a lot of poverty here that is not talked about, and I think that's the thing, right? We all in our countries like to celebrate our successes. For example, here in Scotland, we've got a massive homelessness crisis. We don't talk about that. We don't tell you guys in America when you're coming to Scotland, come and visit us. We've got Loch Ness Monster, we've got castles, and we've got lots of homeless people. We don't say that, but it is a fact. And I guess it's the same in America. The wealth is concentrated just like every other country in the world, right? There's a lot of very rich people in America, but there's a lot of poor people. And I actually had one really deep experience that I would like to reference, okay? My first day in Orlando. I left the hotel like 7 in the morning because I wanted to go out and take some nice drone shots of a lake that was next to our hotel, right? I went around the lake, and then when I got to the other side, there were about 5 or 6 people sleeping rough under the trees, okay? I didn't want to wake them up, so I moved about 500 yards down the way, and one of the guys who was up anyway came over and spoke to me. He was interested in my drone, and then we ended up just chatting for about 20 or 30 minutes. He told me all about his life and how much he struggles and stuff. He sleeps in the park. I mean, that is definitely not wealth, is it? Exactly the same as we have here in the UK. So I think these things need to be put into context. America's a rich country with a lot of amazing things in technology and finance and industry, but also there's a lot of poverty.
Yeah, for sure. Like when I got to New York was it last year? No, year before. It was November 2023. Just New York, stunning. Manhattan, stunning. Just amazing looking and everything. But, you know, you get to the subways and there's just so many like homeless people, like, you know, on the subway, sleeping at the subway stations. It was quite a surprise. I knew that there would be homeless people like there are here in London, but I think I saw more, like a bit more homeless people. But yeah, London too, we've got, homelessness definitely seems to be on the rise.
Misconception number 2 that I'm going to be busting: Americans only speak English. The first thing I would say about that point, okay, Let's not even talk about America first. Let's talk about the UK. The level of people here in the UK, and up until very recently, I was one of them, can only speak one language, English. That's the only language the majority of people in the United Kingdom can speak. If you find a Scottish person who was born and bred in Scotland, or an English person who was born and bred in England, they have no language skills whatsoever. And then they go traveling around Europe, they go to France, they go to Spain especially, and they expect the locals to be able to speak English. So before we...
Yeah, that is just insane, isn't it? Imagine going to Spain and just being like, all right, mate, do you speak English? Why don't you speak... It's like, come on.
Start lobbing bricks. Let's make sure our house isn't made of glass. Basically, that's what I'm trying to say. I can't speak for America on this front, but I can say that in the UK we are really, really bad at languages. The only reason I learned another language is because my wife is Brazilian, so I learned Portuguese, and it took me 10 years. I am not naturally gifted with languages, but most people here are not. I met a lot of people, especially in New York and especially in Florida, that spoke loads of different languages, certainly Spanish, and I think that's one of the awesome things about America's immigrant culture, right? Is the fact that lots of people have these backgrounds from all around the world who can speak different languages, so that is definitely a myth in my opinion. Here's a misconception.
Yeah, that's a big one. I think in California, don't like half the population speak Spanish, and I think there's parts of America where there's like big Polish communities, so like Polish is spoken and stuff. Yeah, like here in the UK, you don't really find areas where most of the people in that city or town speak a specific language.
For you that Americans are fat. I don't know the specific statistics about obesity in America. I know they are pretty high, but I don't know exact numbers, right? That's one thing, fair enough. But listen, in Scotland, we are the most unhealthy nation in all of Europe.
They love deep fried food in Scotland.
We're the sick man of Europe. That's what they call us, okay? We, I think, have the single lowest life expectancy in Europe and Scotland. If it's not the most, it's definitely in the bottom 3, right? A lot of factors involved in that, smoking, drinking, but mostly it's because of our diet. We really, really badly here in Scotland. A lot of people don't know that, right? We are the sick man of Europe for a good reason. We are very unhealthy here in Scotland. So how can we have this misconception of America that Americans are all unhealthy and eat loads of junk food? And of course I know that is true as well, guys. Like, and here's another thing I noticed about America, right? Of course you might have a lot of people in America overweight. Big deal. You actually also have a lot of people who are at the opposite end of the spectrum. I've never ever in my life seen so many really buff people than I saw in America. One way or another, like, who cares what people look like and how they are, right? It's not something for anybody to judge. Certainly not us in Scotland, okay? We are nobody to judge on this. Number 4.
Yeah, I mean, I didn't see, like, when you watch shows like, have you seen the show on TLC called My 600 Pound Life? If you watch that show, you'll just think that every American is really, really big, you know, and it's just not the case. I would say maybe because I went to, like, you know, New York City and LA and this, like, the cities that where there's a lot of money, maybe I didn't see like an accurate depiction of Americans, but it was about the same. Honestly, like body shape wise, it was about the same as like the UK. Like, although I did see one really, really, really big person at Walmart in Fresno. Yeah, she was really big, but that was the only really big person I saw in the whole trip.
Okay, Americans do not travel. I think this misconception is based on the fact that something like only 30% of Americans have passports. Is that right? Something like that? Whereas in the UK, we've got a very high number of people with passports. But nonetheless, let me just introduce you to something very quickly, guys, okay? That is the Scottish tourism boom that we have been experiencing here in our country over the last 2 or 3 years. We have been exploding in tourists here in Scotland for a number of reasons. Outlander is definitely partly responsible for that. The amazing show and book written by American author Diana Gabaldon,
I think golf as well, probably.
About the Scottish clan systems, filmed right here in Scotland. Numbers have exploded by multiples of hundreds here in Scotland at all of our tourism sites. And who's responsible? Who do we think is responsible for that explosion in numbers of people coming to Scotland? It's mostly Americans. Outlander is an American phenomenon. Outlander has fans from all around the world. Let me just say that. Everywhere in the world there are Outlander fans, but the most part...
Is Outlander good? This is the first time I'm hearing of it.
The biggest fan base is in America. Listen, last year, around about 500,000 Americans came to Scotland. That is a lot of people. Okay, so yeah, maybe when you're talking about all of the United States as a whole, it's got like how many hundreds of millions of people? The percentage of that of people who actually travel abroad might be small. But listen, there are numbers of factors to think about here. For a start, America is huge. A lot of the states on their own are bigger than the UK. The United States of America is like the size of continental Europe. And that is one of the big criticisms I have of people here in Scotland and the UK. There's loads of places here that people just don't know about, have never been to in their lives. You know how many people here in Scotland and the Central Belt never go to the Scottish Highlands? It's staggering, alright? So if I lived in the States, there's so many places I would want to explore before even thinking about going abroad.
Yeah, that's a big one, honestly. Like, America just has so much natural variety. You've got canyons, mountains, you can ski. There's places where you can go ski. You know, there's like deserts, like there's like swamps. You know, you've got all the national parks. Like there's, you know, you've got beaches. Like there's anywhere that you would want to go in the world, you can find pretty much a similar place within the US. So you wouldn't have to fly. So I get why a lot of Americans don't go abroad. Plus it's more expensive to go abroad, you know.
This is a really bizarre misconception, okay? Americans are backwards when it comes to science. This one I find particularly bizarre, okay? Fair enough, there are a lot, it seems, of, for example, climate skeptics from America who make a lot of noise. But there are an equal amount of people on the other side from America as well. So I think this is just one of the clear problems of trying to lump everybody in together in the same pot. Yeah. And saying they're all the same, because they're really not. And like, just think about this for a second. NASA, the leaders of space technology, travel, exploration in the world, always has been until now, is from the United States of America. Like, who can argue against that? NASA have done some spectacular things. And also, as I mentioned earlier on, technology in America is like way ahead of everybody else in a lot of different sectors and departments. Medicine and healthcare, all that technology comes from the States. So yes, there might be a lot of people who are not really into science and really kind of understand the things that are going on in the world, but there are just as many people who really, really do, much more than we do. So there you go. That is definitely something that should be busted. Another misconception.
I will say that media definitely plays a role in pushing the stereotypes of like Americans not knowing about, you know, world affairs and stuff. Definitely, like, there's always a character on like a TV show that's like an American who all they watch is like American football. They don't care about like non-American sports, things like that, which makes it, that's what sort of starts the stereotype.
Conception. America is a country where religious fanatics rule. This is something that's really, really deep and multi-layered, multifaceted. But I think the thing is with this point, it's more prevalent, much more prevalent in certain states than the others. Bible Belt, for example, very heavily Christian, but that doesn't mean that the whole country is. I met so many people, especially in the north, who were atheists. It's a very big mix, and there's also people from all sorts of religions in America. I was even invited to see some of the multi-faith stuff that goes on from people from all different types of religious communities. I was very interested in New York, for example, to see areas that were very heavily influenced, for example, by Roman Catholicism, especially from the Italian communities. And then there was like the areas that were dominated more by Orthodox Jews, and also areas with a lot of Muslims. There's a very big mix of religious diversity in America, and I think that's cool. And the way that we look at it in Scotland definitely is different, right? And let me explain why. Scotland is an old country, right? We have been doing religion, we have been doing Christianity here in Scotland for literally thousands of years, way before the United States of America was even founded or even thought about. And I think the natural progression when you take a time period like 1,000 years, for example, very, very few people now are Christian compared to 20 years ago or compared to 100 years ago.
Yeah, it does seem like, I think I read somewhere that religion in the West, like in Europe in particular, is slowly on the decline. Like younger generations seem to not be identifying with modern religions. Is that happening in America, like particularly in the South, where I think the South is known to be super duper religious? Are the numbers, would you say, growing, staying the same, or declining in terms of like religious uptake?
Especially the younger generations, it is not a Christian country anymore. A lot of our churches, for example, are mere relics. You know, we have churches struggling to find people to fill spaces as reverend ministers and priests. It's just a thing that happens over large periods of time, right? Number 7, Americans are workaholics, obsessed with work. You know what? That's true.
Yeah, from what I've heard and seen, I don't know if Americans are workaholics or if it's the companies in America that just don't allow Americans to like take a lot of annual leave. They don't give you as much time off as we get here.
I have never been anywhere in the world where people are so committed to work and that work ethic. And I think this is actually something to be proud of, something to be celebrated. Yeah. Why is that a bad thing? Why is this a stereotype that anybody should kind of pour scorn on? What is the American dream? Is the American dream something that's real or not? Whether it is or not, today it's not something for me to decide. But what I can say is it has been for a lot of people, and it does seem like the place. And I definitely get this impression in America. If you go there and you work hard and you really follow a path, you can be basically anybody you want to be. And listen, I've got first-hand experience of this. I worked for 2 massive American companies when I worked in London for 5 years. Both of them were banks based on Wall Street. And when the bosses from America used to come over, I think frankly they were quite shocked at how many days holiday we get here in the UK, and like how quickly we leave the office at 5 p.m. because apparently in their offices they stay until 10 p.m. They don't get hardly any holidays compared to what we get.
But I don't really encourage that though. What do you guys think about that? I do think hard work is a fantastic thing and work ethic for sure, but you should still have a life outside of your job. Like if you leave your office at 9 p.m, 10 p.m, and you're getting in at 9 a.m, 8 a.m, when do you see your family? When do you have time to rest and relax?
I don't know. I'd like to know what you guys think about this point. Definitely down in the comments below. Americans work hard, probably don't get as many holidays as we do, but is it a good or a bad thing? I don't know. I don't think it's bad necessarily. Next one, okay?
I'm kind of on the fence.
Americans are loud. Americans are loud. And what the heck is the problem with that? Now, in a Northern European context, let me tell you, Scottish people are actually considered pretty loud. And we are loud. We like to talk a lot. I think I'm an example of that. But I consider nations that are quiet to be a little bit less fun, less outgoing. What I experience in America are people who are very outgoing, and that comes across as loud, but really it's not. I remember being on a cruise in the Mediterranean about 5 or 6 years ago, right? Bumped into a lot of Americans, and I had a blooming great time with them. We were up partying all night, and I could be as loud as I wanted and I enjoyed myself. And listen, only a couple of weeks ago, a friend came to me and said they went on a holiday and like it was a little bit overshadowed because there was a lot of really loud Americans there. And I couldn't help thinking to myself, like, blooming hell, enjoy yourself. That's what life is, right? Make friends.
For sure. I'm all about that. Life is short, man. You can't take life too seriously. I'm not saying that you should be, you shouldn't have a work ethic and things, but we've only got like 85 years on this planet. We spend like a third of that time asleep. Like, we got to make the most of the time we have.
Go crazy, have a party. Number 9, and like as I say, we're getting to the meat of this, but this is one I can debunk right away. Americans are rude. My experience is Americans are not necessarily rude. What they are is more direct, okay? And especially in places like New York, I find people there are very direct, and it's not rude. They come to you and they'll say what they think. I think it's funny that in New York, for example, when there's something going on in the traffic, or somebody bumps into you, or sometimes if they get annoyed, they'll just say it. It's not like being rude, it's just being upfront and direct. But on the opposing side, a lot of Americans I met were so friendly, so kind, and so helpful, more so than I had experienced in many countries around the world, let me tell you. That is something I want to debunk. People from every state, people from every background I met, rich, poor, doesn't matter where they were from, I met lots of really amazingly nice, kind people. So it's just something that's not true. And that leads me nicely onto the last point.
I will say, when I went to Cat's Deli, because they were so busy, like they're like, I think it even says it on like the at the front, you need to know exactly what you want to order by the time you get there. If you don't, you get sent to the back. There's no umming and ahhing. Like, but I suppose it makes sense because it was so busy in there.
And this is heavy, loaded, but I think it's something that we need to discuss absolutely, okay? And that is that Americans are ignorant. A lot of people around the world always say this about Americans without even really knowing them or even going to America. They'll say, Americans are ignorant of the rest of the world. And you know what? From my perspective, to say that Americans are ignorant is an ignorant comment. Because at the end of the day, there are ignorant people anywhere you go in the world, right? Including here in Scotland. We've got a lot of ignorant people here who really don't know about other cultures and other places. And they don't know about America. That is for sure. Listen, I was probably very ignorant on my first trip to America as well. I'm an open-minded person. I like to go places and really just experience it. and just go with the flow, right? I guess one thing on my first trip when I went, a lot of the talk of that trip was on heavy subjects that we don't really understand here in the UK, okay? Things like gun culture, because that's something that we just don't understand here. We don't get it because we don't have it. It's not part of our society. It's not something that we even think about. I'd never ever seen a gun in my life until I went to America. So when I went there for the first time and I saw guns, a lot of guns, it was like, oh my God, like a bit of a shock to the...
Yeah, this is one thing that Americans watching this, if you ever like speak to a Brit or a European, and they've got like questions about the gun culture and stuff, if they come across, you know, the Brits, if we come across as like ignorant, it's not from a bad place. It's genuinely because we don't have it here and we don't know and we don't understand it. Like that's literally, it's just like think of it almost like a curiosity instead of like a negative.
The system. Does that mean that I'm wrong to think like that? No, it doesn't. But at the same time, as a Scottish person, as a European going to America and kind of seeing that culture and being in that culture, it's wrong for me to come to America and put my standards based on my society and how my society is set up on how it is over there. It's just wrong, it's not right, it doesn't work. That is ignorance on our behalf. A lot of people have been going through my old videos of that trip and seeing the fact that I was out there on a bit of a gun day, and that day was set up by the US Embassy to really kind of immerse us in that culture. And you know what, to take somebody who's never been in that culture and shove them in at the deep end, literally, is not necessarily dangerous, but it could definitely lead to misunderstandings. See, for example, how I was handling a gun very nervously, like, and I just hope you realize it's not something like me coming there and saying, you're wrong, or anything like that. It's just saying it's not part of my culture, I don't understand it. And I'm definitely willing to, like, investigate and have a look into it, and I think I did that, right? I got into the deep end, I went to a shooting range, I didn't particularly enjoy the experience. That doesn't make me wrong, that doesn't make me a wimp or anything like that.
Man, I cannot wait. I'm like, when I come to Texas, Dallas this year, one of the first things I'm gonna do is go to a range. I really want to experience it. Last time I was in America, I didn't get the chance to do it. This time, 100%. I need to find a good one in Dallas to go to. If any people have recommendations, send me an email.
Like that, like a lot of people have been suggesting, it's just different, right? But at least I can actually step over to the other side and look. And I think partly that is what the important issue is on both sides, right? Ignorance is a really loaded word that doesn't really mean anything unless you put context into it. But equally, I met so many people in America who were really open-minded and knew a lot about different cultures, knew a lot about my culture in Scotland, and we had some really awesome, deep conversations about these types of stuff with people who were really interested in listening in what I had to say, and vice versa. So, you know, I've met ignorant people all around the world. Is America any more ignorant than anywhere else? I don't think so. Guys, listen,
Fun video, and so much of what he said is true. I think a lot of these stereotypes are purely from places of ignorance, like, because most people, not a lot of people get to travel, especially to America. Like, if you don't live in Europe, getting a visa to get to America can be really hard. So, you know, most opinions that they have on Americans are based on, you know, the military, the American military, things that have happened in the past, stuff they see on TV, and propaganda. So they're not always going to be from places of actual knowledge. And when that person then gets to go to America or meet Americans, so most of the time it's just like, whoa, it's not what I thought whatsoever. It's completely different. So yeah, it's honestly, Americans watching this, most of these stereotypes, yeah, you can kind of brush them off. Thanks for watching, guys, and I'll see you in the next one.